Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Robert Rausch, and I'm the Executive Director of Gay and Lesbian Youth Services of Western New York. This is my final segment in my story time for what it's worth. Tonight is my personal story, and I am sharing it to you via a book that was written by Roberta Showalter Kreider entitled Together in Love. Roberta was a very, very interesting person. We met her when she was already in her 80s, living in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, which is the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton area. And Roberta had a very interesting story. She was extremely conservative. Her husband was a minister, and her brother was gay and had AIDS. And during the AIDS epidemic, she got to know her brother much better and came to an understanding about her brother through her religion and began to preach as a conservative person and practitioner to other conservative religious peoples in biblical language that they understood, um, about why society and religion have to be and are accepting of LGBTQ individuals. So I'm not going to talk about all the specifics of that. You can Google Roberta. There's lots of information that she has. She's written several books. Uh, in the 1990s, my partner Stephen Olafson and I met Roberta and her husband, and Stephen created a very close relationship with Roberta, and she kind of trusted him. He began to review some of her writing and design book covers for her and that sort of thing. And we were asked to submit to and are the first story in her book Together in Love, which is an anthology about many individuals, LGBTQ individuals, and their love stories and coming out and their stories together. And Roberta signed her copy to us. um, Stephen Robert, your story is an important part of this book. Thank you for sharing it. Your cover is beautiful. With appreciation, Roberta. So, Steve had a very religious background as well. In fact, he went through very, very difficult times. And for those who know me, they know that Steve passed away in July of 2018 of metastatic prostate cancer. At the end of Steve's life, the struggles that he had had with being gay and coming to terms with that came back to him. And it made it a difficult death. But Steve journeyed long and hard with this question. When we wrote this together, we wrote it back and it was published in 2002. So there were quite a few years after that, and I may kind of stop as I read this to update you on what happened. So this is a chronicle. This is the final in my series. I have not received comments, but please do feel free to comment on this if you're watching it. I will not be continuing with this series. I believe the last number of viewers was 4 viewers for my story, which was a wonderful story in my mother's house. So if you haven't watched that, please watch that one. It is a great story. So here is the chapter 1 of Together in Love by Stephen Olafson and Robert Rausch. Robert says, Steve and I have been together since 1989 when I moved to Jamestown, New York, to take a job as the director of the local American Heart Association office. As I looked for a place to live, I saw a block of townhouse flats. They were some of the most picturesque apartments in the city of Jamestown, but there was no indication that any of them were available and no phone number to call. I went into the optician's office on the first floor to ask if there were any apartments available. The optician looked confused and he answered, "Why, yes, the one upstairs is for rent." So I am alone at our office, and I apologize, but the phone rang, and it was a very important call. I'm the only one taking calls right now on the telephone, although our staff is working, and they are all doing a really great job during this time. So back to the story. Um, I was talking about the apartments that I rented in Jamestown, New York. And when I went into the optician's office on the first floor to ask if there were any apartments available, the optician looked confused and answered, "Why, yes, the one upstairs is for rent." He gave me Steve's phone number, but I didn't know whose number it was at the time. When I dialed, I heard a recorded male voice with a slight Jamestown Swedish accent. I thought nothing of it and explained my desire for an apartment. Later, when he showed me the apartment, I knew it was the one for me. Steve said to me, "I have a really good feeling about this." I knew what he meant without knowing what he meant. I was preoccupied with moving from my home city to take a job raising money and running health programs. This was a major change for me. The tall, smiling local boy, he was 32 at the time, was a curiosity that I wasn't ready to think about, not to mention that his teeth were less than perfect. Afterwards, we discovered that the rental sign with Steve's phone number had fallen from the window, but the townhouse apartments had caught my eye. Coincidence? We have cohabitated for 12 years and currently share a 100-year-old house that we bought together in Pennsylvania in 1995. So ultimately, Steve and I were together for 29 years and moved a couple times after we had purchased that house in Allentown. I grew up in a German American family with close ties to the Lutheran Church. My mother chose the Lutheran Church in her East Buffalo, New York neighborhood to be her church home. After her divorce from her first husband, my maternal grandmother married a man whose brother was a Lutheran minister. The church is, without question, a presence in individual communities, and the love and openness of its members are the magnets of faith, regardless of denomination, regardless of religion. I was raised and confirmed in the Lutheran Church, but now I am no longer a member. My maternal grandmother firmly maintained that her father, who came from England as a merchant marine and fought in the Spanish-American War, was a Jew who kept faith with both Jewish and Christian traditions. This family story was influenced me for more than any other in forming my faith. I can feel the blood of my Jewish mothers inside of me. My faith has run from childish blind acceptance to adolescent rebellion to finding a collegial relationship with God as a loving friend. By searching for the Christ that dwells within, I have found that God wants to relate to us as an intensely intimate and personal level, which speaks only of one thing: equality in existence together between the Creator and humankind with one another. While I believe God is incomprehensibly grand, divine, and powerful, I also believe that God is my partner, and I feel this is reflected in my relationship with Stephen. Like many children, I established my sexual identity at an early age. My interests ranged from the stereotypically feminine for a young gay male to average boy interests, including mechanical science and comic books. These things defined me as a person, encompassing both the masculine and feminine, even before the question of sexual attraction or identity. And that, by the way, is where we are today, when issues of gender identity and gender expression are the first in consideration and not sexuality. I know from memories of at least as early as 7 or 8 years old that my sexual fantasies were focused on men and other boys. It was only later that I discovered that what this meant in relation to cultural and religious acceptance. I kept my heart subdued throughout my high school years, not daring to mention what Oscar Wilde termed the love that dared not speak its name. Then Stephen writes, I honestly cannot remember a time when I did not know that God was around and with me. Likewise, for as long as I can remember, I knew that I was gay. I did not always have a word for it, but I knew it. I grew up in a family that at times resembled All in the Family more than it did Father's Knows Best. Our family of 3 sons, with me in the middle, was a typical upstate New York family, except that I was the only one who attended church. Church was not a priority in our house, but I felt very much at home there and dreamed of being a pastor. As a teen, I found all the scripture passages that I believed were relative to homosexuals in the Bible. All seven of them versus more than 360 references to heterosexual persons. I was very forceful in pushing those views, trying to convince myself and others that all gays were going to hell. I did not understand the background of those and other scriptures as I do now. Because of my frustration, suicide was a consideration on more than one occasion. But God always seemed to have the right person in my life when I needed someone. It was a little hard for me. I cannot count, nor would I attempt to add up the hours of tears, fist pounding, fasting, Bible reading, begging, pleading, and bargaining with God. I was trying to rid myself of this affliction. I ran from my feelings, pounding them into the deepest marrow of my being. And yes, I even got married. My rationale was that if I got married, God would see how earnest I was to change and that the attractions I felt would fade. For 9 years, a faithful and faithful marriage, nothing changed. I was lying to God, my church, my wife, and myself. During that time, I was very active in my church and served in the many capacities, including preaching when pastors were on vacation. It was after a counseling session that my wife asked me point blank if I were gay. Here I was, driving down the road, tears running down my face, fearing to speak a word. She asked me again and then asked why I would not admit it if I were. I told her because I would be afraid of losing my friends. She said it was nobody else's business. She also said that if I were gay, she did not want to remain married to me because that would be unfair to both of us. The fact was, it was safer to remain married, easier to hide and not face the truth. After much prayer, my wife and I decided to divorce. At this same time, the United Methodist District Superintendent asked me if I would be available and interested in taking over a small country church that could not afford a pastor of its own. I was excited, but I explained to him what was going on. He said that he would give me some time to settle things, and we would talk again. That talk never came, and I was not surprised. During our divorce proceedings, I pulled myself out of the church, thinking that neither the church nor God would want me. I also feared that no one else would want me either. I was preparing myself for a very lonely life as a single gay man condemned by all. People around me told me that gay people are unhappy, hopping from bed to bed, from back room to back room, and condemned to hell. It was a long time before I realized that God loves me as I was created. This has been confirmed in many ways. In 1998, I shared my story in a mailing to all the ministers of the United Methodist Churches of Western New York conferences where I was active, and UMC bishops throughout the USA. I was amazed at the positive responses. Of course, there were a couple of negative responses also. To open my life up completely as I told my life story was a very difficult thing for me to do. It was scary, but Robert's encouragement helped me to follow through with it. The same year we met, Robert invited me to join his family for Christmas. I was very nervous about meeting the in laws. On Christmas Eve, Robert and I babysat for Megan and Brendan, Robert's niece and nephew, while the others went to Mass. Robert's sister converted to Catholicism for her second husband. After they came home, we went to a Methodist church midnight service. When we returned, everyone was in bed. The sofa bed had been pulled out and the sheets turned down for us. Included on each pillow was a mint. Robert's father's sense of humor. To me, this was amazing, as I had only heard the horror stories of how families rejected a gay child. I was made to feel like a member of the family. As for my own family, a few years ago, my father and stepmom came to visit. They had not met Robert previous to this meeting, and quite frankly, I wasn't sure how things would go. At the close of their visit, Dad walked up to Robert and gave him a hug. This meant so much to me. However, there are other family members who will not speak to me anymore, and while I'm sorry they feel this way, I cannot and will not hide behind a mask of heterosexuality anymore. GLBT persons are often blamed for the breakdown of the family, yet we crave and value birth and extended family togetherness. Faith is a major part of the cement for any family relationship, whether it be with our Creator, between spouses, or child and parent. Perhaps the most significant thing that we have accomplished together was the establishment and co-directorship of the Lehigh Valley Gay Men's Chorus in 1994. We both felt strongly that there should be a musical group in the area that would not only provide good music and entertainment, but would also help break down the stereotypes and be a conduit for discussion and understanding of gay and lesbian issues. LVGMC has created a safe space for singers and also a non-bar situation where GLBT people and their friends could get together. There were times when we were harassed by phone and mail, but we both knew the chorus was important to the life of the gay community. In 1999, we were nominated for the Pennsylvania Governor's Excellence in Arts Awards for launching the chorus. We could not have accomplished this if we did not have the kind of faith and relationship with each other that we do. After moving to Allentown, Pennsylvania, I felt the pull to get back into a church, and Robert supported me in this. I missed the Christian fellowship terribly. While dusting the house, Robert found a love poem on my desk, lyrics to a song I was composing. He read the words describing an exceptional love and realized the words were talking about my personal love for God. Like the words of St. John Chrysostom centuries before, they spoke about a committed love to Christ. A newspaper article about Wesley United Methodist Church in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, constructing a new building aroused my interest. I decided to check it out and fell in love with the music program there. However, I was not going to get involved in a church that would not welcome us as a couple, so I met with Pastor Bill. The pastor spoke of his love and acceptance of all people, including gays and lesbians, and confirmed that both Robert and I would be welcome at Wesley. Robert is not an official member of the church because of the strong United Methodist policy as listed in the United Methodist Book of Discipline that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. This congregation allows the gay men's chorus to rehearse and perform in their building, even though Robert is not an official member. His family is made to feel at home at Wesley when they visit us. On one of the many Christmases that we have played host to Robert's family, his Aunt Sharon from Phoenix, Arizona sang with our church choir on Christmas Eve. I was instrumental in studies being done at Wesley regarding the church and homosexuality, and continue to challenge the church's official stand as I work to facilitate change from within. Robert and I agree in many matters of faith. We also disagree. It's part of the vibrancy of our relationship, Robert says. We don't want to give the impression that we think only believing one way is the basis of faith. Faith in God can be expressed in vast and different ways. So we know that the work that Steve did, and he did not live to see it, was in many ways reversed, and the Methodist Church looks now as if it will split over the issue of sexuality. Society has moved on to other issues, but the church is still struggling with that issue. Also, Steve's family that he mentioned before not being in touch with did get in touch with us after this time, and there was a reconciliation of his family and all of its members. It was not easy at our home the Christmas before he passed. Back to the story in the book, then I write, Steve has a job with a contracting company, and we feel very blessed that I am as welcome at company events as the husbands and wives of other employees. And of course, at that time, we could not be married. Our partnership also gave us the opportunity to fight employment discrimination in my workplace. When I was employed at a comparatively large organization that served youth in Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, I felt clearly called to address a situation involving a gay youth program that was established by a gay male student intern. He was subsequently ill-treated in the uphill battle of beginning such a program. My employer moved the program from the influence and jurisdiction of the gay community members who had created it, and hid it from both them and the public, although claimed to continue the program. When faced with whether or not to mention my concerns to my employer, I was met with the resounding realization that fate had employed me there in order to address this issue. Even though I feared losing income and my job once again in my life, Steve helped me. He assured me we would make it through together, even if I did lose my job. He listened to me while I was on the phone with the people involved with the situation, and was a good sounding board for me, sharing his concerns, support, and his own views of how to handle the situation. Steve says, we sometimes approach problems from opposite directions. This may appear as though we disagree, yet to us we are making sure we are seeing the issue from all sides before we act. We both utilize and recognize the power of prayer and meditation. On several occasions, my employer told me that the organization was concerned that gay men were potential predators on youth. It was clear that they felt they were somehow protecting the youth by keeping members of the gay community away. For those who grow up gay and know in their hearts the fear of violence and retaliation that might be directed at them if their difference is discovered, the idea of being a predator is simply absurd. Men who are such aggressors rarely identify themselves as homosexual, nor have they developed any sort of gay identity. In the end, the gay community members joined me to meet with the organization's executive director and were able to make it clear that gays and lesbians know when they are being mistreated and are organized to address issues of discrimination when they arrive. Without Steve's support, I would not have felt able to address the subject at all. We share a very strong concern over the gay teen suicide rate and are concerned about programs like this one. Together, we write, as we work toward our individual goals, Steve in his job in construction and Robert working toward his doctorate in complementary and alternative health, it has been very important to have the support we know each other gives. For many years, the idea of being gay and okay has been out of the closet. The American Psychological Association removed homosexuality from the list of disorders in 1974, and more recently has become more aggressive in denouncing therapists who say that they can change a person's sexual orientation. Oddly enough, homophobia, especially the type that led to the beating death of Matthew Shepard and the execution-style murders of gays and lesbians across the country, is now classified as a psychological disorder. In spite of that opposition, GLBT persons are now more accepted in the workplace and at a growing number of churches across the country. The issues we face are not really the issues of fundamentalist resistance to our acceptance. They are the issues of where to fit into a world of acceptance and visibility. The days of lurking in the shadows and sneaking around in a world of hidden sexuality are over for many of us. The behaviors of self-loathing and self-hatred that seem to justify dangerous and promiscuous lifestyles filled with alcohol, drugs, and sex can no longer be accepted by the gay community. Indeed, we can no longer say, I am going to hell anyway because of my lifestyle, so what does it matter what else I do? Those days can happily be over because there is a church at the top of the hill. However, something is wrong when we can have services of blessing for buildings sanctioned by our churches, but not for a committed same-sex couple. This kind of message stabs at the heart of those couples who want nothing more than to live faithful lives supported by those around them, including their church. When we win the battle of acceptance as couples, what then? This image of a church at the top of the hill is a symbol for the long and perilous climb that gays and lesbians have endured toward the ultimate goal of every human being: spiritual growth and understanding. These truths are not separate from our sexual identities, but intertwined with them. We both have come to this realization, and we both agree that we would not be here without the love and commitment of our relationship. We do not mean to imply that not having a relationship means one cannot climb a path toward greater spiritual life and understanding. It is Christ, that internal sense of spirituality, that guides our journey, not a picture of gay romantic love. In our own experience, we have discovered that when we depend on each other for economic and emotional support, we can also begin to explore spiritual longings with one another, even though those longings may be expressed in different ways for the two people in a relationship. After all, there is a lot of ground to cover in the vastness of God's love. We believe that to be closed out of the political structure of churches and religious organizations represents a challenge to the gay community, but it also presents the opportunity to develop a God-centered spirituality. Christ's blessings are not just for those on membership lists at certain denominations of churches. There is so much opportunity going on across denominations for gay and lesbian people. There is a vibrant life and a vibrant call to gather together. The Metropolitan Community Church, the Lehigh Valley, held a blessing service for gay and lesbian couples in February of 2001, with 9 ministers of different denominations participating. After 11 years together, we were one of the 33 couples who were blessed. During the service, we had the opportunity to perform the vocal duet composed by Eric Helmuth, Finally Here, a song about gay relationships. It was a wonderfully moving experience and probably the largest religious gathering ever of GLBT people in the Lehigh Valley. Having faith and being gay are not mutually exclusive, as some would have us believe. It is our spiritual faith and our faith in each other that has helped us make it this far, and it will continue to be the foundation of the road to the church at the top of the hill. So that's the end of this story reading, and it's the longest video of all. And it's the end of the series for Storytime for now. I want to emphasize that the views and ideas that I read and expressed in the reading of our chapter from the book Together in Love are not the views or ideas of Gay and Lesbian Youth Services of Western New York, otherwise known as GLIS, but are just simply my personal story. So I've arrived back here in Western New York after living in Pennsylvania for most of our relationship life. Steve and I were married when it became legal in July of 2014. And of course, at that time, I had no idea that he would pass a mere 4 years later. But I am back in Buffalo, and I have a new relationship with somebody, and his name is Jay, and we purchased a home here together. So as we're talking about books and chapters in books, I have started my next chapter here at Gay and Lesbian Youth Services of Western New York. Take care, everyone. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are feeling well. Be well and stay well. Bye-bye.